All right, I don't have a lot of time to edit this video and make it fancy this time because I want to get this out there by the end of the day. I was talking with my sister yesterday. Her ex has sued her for custody of their kids. And according to their divorce decree, they have to go to mediation first. The mediation is going to happen tomorrow. So I wanted to do a chart today so that I can get ahead of it. Oh, and by the way, the rule about you shouldn't read a chart if you're too close to it still applies. Do as I say, not as I do. It can be hard to be objective when reading these kinds of charts. I'm going to do my best to kind of just look at this from an astrological point of view and not get my opinions all tangled up in there. But obviously, I'm human. We all are. So this is not strictly a horary. It's actually an event chart. So I pulled the chart for the time that the meeting starts. And then I use the horary tools on the event chart. Okay, so here's what we're looking at. All right. So the first house is represented by my sister, and then her ex is represented by the seventh house, and planets in the seventh house. Now, this is a mediation hearing. So it's not actually a court case, so it's a little bit different, but I'm going to still use the midheaven for the judge, which is actually the mediator. So we're looking at the 10th house and its ruler. All right, so what we do generally in a competition chart like this, you just take the strengths of the first house ruler and the strengths of the seventh house ruler, whichever one's stronger, quote, wins. Obviously, life isn't that simple. It's not just a matter of winning or losing. There's a lot of nuance. There's stuff that happens. So we have the Libra ascendant, and then Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is right here, applying to the second house, but still pretty strong there. We have Mercury right on the ascendant right here. That's a really striking image whenever you have a planet that's just directly on an angle. It really says something about the nature of what's going on. Now, I said I was going to talk about my sister, but I also need to point out the ex. So he is represented by Mars right here, because Mars rules Aries, the seventh house Aries. So if we're going to do this surface level analysis of it, we would look at the dignity scores of these two planets. So we have Venus over here. According to my software, Venus gets 16 points. And then we have Mars, and according to this calculation, Mars gets -6 points. So there's a really big difference there. It looks like my sister's going to come out on top. It's kind of an open and shut as far as the dignity calculations. That's pretty straightforward. But let's look into some of these nuances. So I mentioned Mercury on the ascendant. What this tells me is that she is going to be able to express her case very clearly, logically. Silver-tongued Mercury is going to just blah, 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 blurt it out, and it's going to sound wonderful and convincing and amazing. And Mercury's right there on Spica, the fixed star Spica, which is a highly benefic star. I think this looks really good for my sister's case as far as being able to be persuasive and convincing and eloquent. Now, compare that with the ex, who is represented by Mars, really in close conjunction with the sun here. Mars is under the rays of the sun. So if you looked in the sky, you wouldn't be able to see Mars because it's swallowed up by the rays of the sun. This can indicate somebody who is really overwhelmed or who is not seeing things clearly, so this planet is kind of just lost in this burning fire of the sun and unable to see clearly. As far as the meeting, what I think this means is that he's going to show up and he's just going to wing it, and he's just going to say whatever comes to the top of his mind, and he's just going to come across as like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you're just saying all this random stuff. You're not like presenting this convincing, clear picture and showing yourself in the best light. You're like completely lost. Another thing that underlines this idea of him being kind of illegible or not clear is that Mars is in the 12th house. The 12th house is a dark house. Things are not very obvious when they're in that house. And then you compare that with this image of this orator Mercury. it's really going to be this obvious difference of who's prepared, who has their act together, and who doesn't. But there's a really interesting issue here between Mars and Venus. So Venus is in Mars' sign of Scorpio, and Mars is in Venus' sign of Libra. So they are in a condition of what's called mutual reception. What that means is that they have to work together. They rely on each other in some way. At some level, there's actually this sense of we actually need each other here, and in a kind of a weird way. So I do see that there is going to have to be some compromise. There is going to be some sense of, you got to play by his rules and he's got to play by your rules, and there's going to be this kind of maybe uncomfortable negotiation going on there. I don't think it'll be super obvious, but I think that that's going to be this sort of like a psychological or a spiritual dynamic to what's going on. Now let's look at the mediator. So the weird thing about mediation is it's not like there's a ruling that is binding. The mediator is there to get the parties to come to an agreement. So the mediator is ruled by Cancer on the midheaven, which is the moon over here in Taurus. And the moon is very strong in this chart. It's exalted in Taurus. It's in the 7th house. So that means it's angular. It's in a very strong position. However, another really interesting thing about this moon is it is conjunct her natal sun. She has a 12 degrees Taurus sun, which is just fascinating how there are these resonances here. Another interesting thing is that the moon is applying to an opposition with Venus right here, which represents my sister. So there is an aspect. The moon does not apply to Mars. It doesn't see Mars. They are in what's called aversion. There's no aspect there, but the moon and Mars are both ruled by Venus, so there is some kind of affinity. And it's interesting that the moon placed in the 7th house of the ex, what I told my sister is I think that the mediator will be sympathetic to the ex, kind of as a matter of resonance. Like we don't know the name or gender or anything about this mediator, but I feel like there is going to be some level where the mediator relates to the ex. But as the meeting goes on, I think the mediator is going to really see. Again, we have an aspect. The mediator is going to see my sister's side and really understand what she's saying. And the mediator, he or she, is not going to understand or follow what the ex is trying to say. So the issue at stake here is the children, which parent they're going to live with. And my sister is very skeptical that she is going to get primary custody. And things have not gone well for her in the past with this divorce case. And she's like, I just don't think, I don't think anything's going to happen from this. I think it's just going to blow up and we're going to have to go to court and we're going to have to suffer through the next few months of this really difficult living situation with the children. However, I told her something different and she was like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. So the 5th house is the children. We have Pisces here in the 5th house, which is ruled by Jupiter. Okay, so we have, now Jupiter is retrograde, okay? Retrograde indicates going back. And Jupiter is at an exact trine to the ascendant. So that is a really striking image here of the children being sent back to live with my sister, who's represented here by the ascendant. Now, my sister thinks this is impossible because of the nature of mediation, and he would have to agree, and he probably won't agree, and I just don't think that this is going to happen. But I'm looking at this trine and the fact that Jupiter is retrograde, going back to a situation that they were in before, which, they used to live with her. Another thing is Jupiter going retrograde. If you look down here, its next aspect is going to be to Venus. Now, it's a square. That could indicate some tension or some struggles or some problems, but that's Jupiter's next aspect. Venus is applying to Jupiter and Jupiter is applying to Venus. That looks like a return of the children to their mother. I don't know what to tell you. This looks likely. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know how her ex is going to agree when he's the one who said, no, I want to change this arrangement in the first place. But I'm just telling you what I'm seeing in the chart. Now, the other question of the mediation is, are we going to have to actually drag this out to court, right? Because the point of mediation is that you want to bring them to an agreement so you don't have to go to court. But if either side is like, no, this sucks, I don't like, what you're saying, and they can't come to an agreement, then it does have to be sent to court. That's kind of like how it works. So, to look at that, I'm going to look at the fourth house, which indicates the end of the matter or the kind of final situation. So we have our fourth house here. It's Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. Saturn is retrograde. I think that does look like a situation where we are going to have to drag this out again. Retrograde indicates we might have to do this over, right? So I think that there will be a call to go to court, unfortunately. And just the nature of how the system works, courts take a long time. It could be several months before they even get a hearing, and Saturn is a slow planet, so it kind of looks like, yeah, that might end up being the case. But you can cross that bridge when you get there. So I guess kind of wrapping up my final analysis of this chart, I think they will make some progress in mediation. There will be a few things that they can agree to. I think that what she's asking for a certain schedule for the children to be with her more often than they are now. I think she will get that. I think the mediator will be able to at least kind of make a little bit of progress in that area. I do think that the ex is going to not agree ultimately to certain key features of what they're asking for, and so demand that they go to court. But overall, as far as just this meeting, I think that it will be fairly positive and at least inching forward in a little bit of progress. So this is tomorrow, and I will have to report back and see if I'm right about this stuff.